In the last video, I started the teardown and removed everything on the engine down to the bare block. Today, I'm going to dismantle the rest and open the case. Now that I have mostly everything removed from the outside of the block, I started to disassemble the block itself. I started by draining the oil. I was curious to see what I'm dealing with in terms of the gunk collected in the oil strainer. I did find a few unidentifiable chunks. They seem to be aluminum rather than steel. There was also a dusting of metallic debris mixed in with the sludge at the bottom of the strainer. I'm not sure how long it takes for this amount of sludge to collect here, but it seems like it's possible this plate has never been removed. Before going further, I set up a magnetic dial indicator to check the end play. In the manual, the target max end play is 0.0004 inches. I'm hitting 5 here. I moved the dial and flywheel position around a few times and consistently measured between 5 and 6. While that is kind of right on the line, I actually sat on this for a while, weighing the pros and cons of running as is or continuing to tear it all down. The cons of tearing it all down being, 1, I've never built an engine before, I'm way out of my element here, and there's a lot to learn. 2, it could potentially get very expensive. 3, it could take a lot more time than I even realize. And 4, there are lots of ways I could screw this up, resulting in a catastrophe, so I'd have to be diligent and methodical. The pros being, I don't know the history of this engine and what it's been through. It could have deeper problems I don't know about yet, and rebuilding from the ground up would give me the peace of mind. And honestly, that's kind of it for the pros. Even though the cons far outweigh the pros here, the one pro is heavier than all the cons, if that makes any sense. So I decided to continue to tear down anyway. There are a lot of YouTube channels dedicated to VW engines, so that has given me the added confidence. I'll link my favorites in the description. Anyway, this is what I came up with to assist in removing the flywheel. To prevent it from spinning, I bolted a pipe from a section of scaffolding I found behind my garage to the flywheel to brace against the floor while I broke torque on the bolts. Still a lot of debris sitting on top of the block that I have to scrape away in order to remove the valve covers here. I didn't expect this to be so difficult to remove, but I found out why when I did. It looks like the valve covers were sealed with this orange silicone. Just for the hell of it, I turned the crankshaft with a ratchet so I could see the rockers in action and check for any seized valves or whatever else you can discover by doing this. Everything seemed to be opening and closing as it should, as far as I can tell. Now, I had some major difficulties removing the exhaust manifolds on both sides. I ended up snapping a couple of head studs right off. I ultimately decided I would need to remove the entire cylinder head and bring it to the bench to remove the manifold completely. Starting here with the rocker arms. Then I pulled the push rods. They were dirty, but in good shape. I blew through each of them to see if they were plugged up. Just oil dripping out. Also very difficult to remove were the pushrod tubes. They did not pop right out, despite what I've been taught to believe. I was a little reckless and crushed a few of them pretty badly. Unfortunately, I did this before I learned that Type 4 pushrod tubes are 2 to 3 times more expensive than Type 1s. Removing the oil filter. Nothing too exciting here, thankfully. Getting the lifters out was also a little bit challenging. I tried magnets, picks, even needle nose pliers to grab them. In hindsight, I could have just left them in and pushed them out of the block when I separated it. Finally, getting to the meat of the matter and removing the cylinder heads themselves. Thankfully, another non event, no broken head studs or anything. Next was the oil pump. I try to be careful not to pry against the block, but I ended up doing that anyway, as well as a few other methods. I realized after the fact this could have been easier if I had removed the perimeter case bolts first to release some of this clamping pressure around the pump and then just pulled it out. The oil sump cover. A little more of that metallic looking gunk here. And I would venture to guess this might be normal for a nearly 50-year-old, 100,000 plus mile aluminum engine case. And then the oil filler mount. And gasket. Getting into the home stretch here, now removing the wrist pins, the circlips first, and then I tapped the pins out with a ratchet extension. I'm sure this case wasn't made this way intentionally with this notch to get a punch in here, but it kind of looks like it. I'm not sure if them being this difficult to remove was a good or bad thing. I believe new pins should slide more easily into new pistons with much more ease than this. Finally ready to crack the case open. I've read it's easy to miss perimeter nuts, and I found that to be absolutely true. Many of them were covered in gunk and hard to detect, and some of them are just hidden very well. I tried to separate the case with one nut still attached, and it was endlessly agonizing. I even got the case separating tool to pry the case halves apart. You can see me here in real time finding another nut, one that should have been very obvious even. What I should have done was look up how many nuts in each size are holding this case together and just poked around until I found them all. Instead, I banged on the case and scratched my head until I went over the entire case methodically and found that one last nut. With that off, I was able to expand the case separation tool and lift the case off with ease, and I was looking at the inside of the block. That's going to do it for this video. Next up, I'll inspect the cam, crankshaft, cylinder heads, pistons, rods, and valves. Thanks for watching.